We are ready. Okay. Tell me when.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Cabinet today. Good to see you all, and welcome to anybody who may be watching in and now or in the future. Just to introduce ourselves, I'm Peter Fox. I'm leader of the council. Perhaps colleagues, could you do the same?
Phil Murphy, Cabinet Member for Resources.
Paul Jordan, Cabinet Member for Governance.
Bob Greenland, Deputy Leader.
Richard John, Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Monlock.
Sarah Jones, Cabinet Member for Social Justice and Community Development. Penny Jones, Cabinet Member for Social Services, Health and Safeguarding.
Colleagues, anybody, opposition leaders would like to introduce yourselves?
Councillor Dimitri Petruni, Leader of the Labour Group.
Councillor Joe Watkins, Leader of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Frances Taylor, Leader of the Independent Group.
Thank you, everyone. And we're joined by lots of officers. Good to see you all. If you contribute, could you just introduce yourself, just for those who may be looking in? That'd be great. Okay, right, so let's move straight on. And the item one, apologies for absence. We have a we're missing Jane Pratt's away on holiday, so she's not obviously here. Apart from that, we are a full house. So declarations of interest, and I have a declaration of interest, and I will be withdrawing a personal and a personal and pecuniary interest, I believe, on the last item, which is I notice all of the items are numbered 1. So it's the Monmouthshire Replacement Local Development Plan Growth and Spatial Options. My interest is obviously I am a tenant of County Ground, which is identified as a potential candidate site, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to be part of anything which talks about growth or spatial options. And I will be withdrawing. I'll fill in the appropriate pro forma. Colleagues, anybody else have one?
I've got one, Leader. I'm a committee member at the St Mary's Church, Lambeth, Discoid, and there's an application in the Welsh Church Fund for funds there. So I don't think there's any need to leave the room, but I certainly won't vote.
Just personal. Sarah?
Same one as you, Peter. So personal pleasure interest on item 3E, Monmouthshire Replacement Local Development Plan Growth and Spatial Options.
Okie dokie. Anybody else? All members? Any members? Anything else, Frances?
Can I just check, please? Obviously, we're not decision making here, so I can't see that necessarily we have to. But I just want to, for probity, just say that I am an armed forces champion on item 1 for an Arran Bevan University Health Board. So just to, I know I'm not contributing.
No, I think thanks for raising it, because I think any elected member, if they're in the meeting, even if they're not taking part, can have to declare interest.
Thank you. So just to be clear.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. So interest, please fill the pro forma in, and we've given them verbally. Anybody else? No? Okay, right. Let's move straight on into the first report, which is absolutely great to have this report before us today, and it's for us to look at the guaranteed interview scheme for service leavers and spouses, reservists and veterans, and it's for us to consider the Armed Forces recognition and recognise the work across Monmouthshire, and also to agree to go progress implementation of the guaranteed interview scheme for service leaders, spouses, reservists and veterans. And you'll see in the report, it's a pretty straightforward report. The Armed Forces Covenant is a promise by the nation, ensuring that those who serve or who have served in the armed forces and the families are treated fairly. And we signed up to the covenant in October 2012. I think we were the second authority. I think Vale of Glamorgan were probably the first authority that signed up to it. And there's a lot of work that has been going on over those years. The Armed Forces Covenant is a voluntary statement of mutual support between a civilian community and its armed forces community at the local level. and support for the armed forces community working and residing in Monmouthshire, and to recognise and remember the sacrifices made by members of the armed forces community, particularly those who have given that greatest sacrifice. The Defence Employer Recognition Scheme, you'll see there, it's abbreviated to ERS, comprises of a bronze, silver and gold award for employers, that's including local authorities. You'll see in the paragraph there how those awards are currently sitting across the various councils. You'll note that Monmouthshire is currently receiving the silver award, together with a few other colleagues, and we see that there are 2 other authorities that have gained the gold award, and I know in Iron Bevan Health Board, I think, are striving for the gold award in the next review as well, and I'm sure there'll be questions further about that element of the report going forward. You'll see the criteria for gold, because obviously it'll be something we'll aspire to, is laid down there in the bullet point section. I won't go through every point of that, but I will invite Joe and Lisa in perhaps to reflect further if they wish afterward. So it brings us back to those recommendations, which I'm sure members are going to want to agree with, and that's to introduce the guaranteed interview scheme for service leaders, their spouses, reservists and veterans, as long as they meet the essential criteria for the person specification job description, and to continue to develop themes of this work as part of our revision to our recruitment and selection policy and associated work streams. Okay, members, I'm going to, perhaps before I open that up, perhaps I'll just invite Joe or Lisa to pick up anything I might not have covered.
Yeah, I am Joe Skino, I'm a Community and Partnership Development Lead, and I am also what I could say as the Policy Officer for Armed Forces in the county. I know that Councillor John was going to ask me this question, so hopefully you don't mind if I just
Please go for it.
answer the question he's going to ask. So as you said, the checklist in the report is essentially what's seen as the minimum to achieve gold. The things that we do within the county, we kind of go over and above that with certain elements. And but obviously the reason why we haven't already gone for gold is that we need to demonstrate some of those things over time and obviously have implemented and demonstrate the impact of. So some of these things might be promoting the covenant through our supply chains and actively promoting to our contractors and people that we procure to that we are covenant friendly and they could also sign up as well. Identification of reservists, cadet force, adult volunteers, veterans, wounded, injured, sick and military spouses and partners. So identifying who within the local authority fit within those criteria. And then sort of demonstrate the advocacy. So our, as you all know, last week, how we sort of went outside and celebrated Armed Forces Day, Reservist Day, and all those different activities that we do across the county to promote and celebrate the armed forces and all the people associated with them. So that's generally some of the things I think we need in place for gold. The submission for gold opens once a year. It'll be around March next year when we can actually apply for it, in which time we've built up a massive evidence base and things that we put in place and things we do to promote that and how we advocate for it. I think Lisa can probably elaborate on anything I have missed as she's a veteran herself.
So I'm Lisa Owens, I'm the Regional Armed Forces Covenant Officer, so I'm MOD funded to work with the local authorities, the 5 across Gwent, to upskill the local authority on what the Armed Forces Covenant is, and by the fact that you've all signed it, what that means and what your responsibilities under the voluntary sign-in is. I can't thank my local authorities enough. Everybody have already been going above and beyond. So all I'm trying to do is make sure that within Gwent, everybody's on sort of the same sort of page, that you're not a postcode lottery, they're getting one service from one or one from another. There's 6 of me that covers all of Wales, so we're trying to have sort of a pan-Wales approach. Monmouthshire were one of the first ones to have silver awards, so we were already thinking on this radar before a lot of the other local authorities. I personally think you deserve gold already. You're doing so much towards the goal. It's having recognition for what you already do, and I do think you really truly deserve that. Everybody has been really, really supportive on all the initiatives that we've planned. So really, I'm trying to make sure that you're all getting the recognition you so rightly deserve. So out of the 5 when I first started, only Monmouthshire and Newport were silver. The others weren't even bronze. So 4 out of 5 are silver now. 2 went for gold this year because one of them has got guaranteed interview schemes. They felt they were ready. The other one are implementing it next week, actually, in the Cabinet, hopefully. So all 5 will be doing, hopefully, the guaranteed interview schemes by the end. What we're trying to achieve with that is we're finding military people, transition and spouses, quite difficult to apply for certain jobs. They can't get across actually what their CV, what their military experience would be. For some of the spouses, they've moved so many times that they could have quite a wealth of background. I, in my 25 years, had two interviews in my entire life. Would I find that really difficult to then apply for a job in the local authority? Do I think, as workforce, can we bring a lot to the local authority? I think we can, but it's getting past that barrier. So having the essential criteria, they still need to be qualified to be able to go for the job. It's just getting them a little bit past how an application form would work, because many of them I joined when I was 17. Had I really applied for many of the jobs before that? No. And then I'm coming out, I won't tell you how old I was when I came out, but you can work it out, I did 25 years. But it's getting over that barrier, and actually as a workforce, I think members of the armed forces community would work really, really well with the local authorities, and we are doing so. There's probably more in the local authority that are part of the armed forces community than you actually realise. So it's about identifying and promoting the great work that everyone's doing. So on that behalf, I'd really like to thank the authority for all the support you've given myself and the armed forces.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thanks for giving sharing that. I mean, it's absolutely so important. I saw a piece in the news this morning which I put out on social media because it really touched me, especially when you listen to the young man's story, a Newport lad. I find it so difficult to get into work because of the perceptions of PTSD and any of his potential injuries or what the injuries he's had and people's perceptions around that. And
I claim a war pension. So as a veteran, I've been injured in service. I get the war pension. I only work 5 days a week. So same. My son, he was on a pension as well for being injured in Afghanistan, and I saw the struggles he had to get a solid interview and to get into work. So I think employers all need to sit up and listen and make sure that these people, whatever they've come through, they've come through it, and they need to be given the next step in the ladder. And we can do all we can to help people, ex-servicemen, as we're looking at here, to at least get a fair crack at the whip. That is absolutely important. So thanks again for all you're doing and all you've done. Colleagues, want to come in?
Yeah. Thanks, Leah. Would you agree that this scheme supports our social justice strategy?
Oh gosh, absolutely, and I think every authority, every organisation should be supporting this type of initiative. And if this doesn't play into social justice strategy, I don't know what does. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, we've got quite a significant armed forces community in Monmouthshire, and I know there have been a lot of events around the county in the past 7 days to mark the recognition we owe to our armed forces. From a ward perspective, I spent a bit of time with a number of Monmouth County councillors at a number of events in the town over the weekends that were really well attended, and recognise the sacrifice that many of our armed forces have made for us. I really don't think we can do enough. I'm really pleased that we've won the silver award. I'm pleased that we're achieving over and above the criteria for the gold award, and look forward to an application for that next March. But I do think we should try to do all we can to support our armed forces, and I think it's a real shame that we're not able to offer the the service pupil premium, and it's something that the Welsh Government has decided not to offer to armed forces families. It's something that is available in England. And I think recognising the impact of having parents in the armed forces that has on a child's education is really important. And I think that's something the Welsh Government really ought to consider, given the impact that having a parent in the armed forces can have on continuity of education.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, can I ask a bit of advice? I just, as a thought, Bob prompted me. I didn't declare an interest in this even because my son. I mean, he's not. You know, should I?
Possibly personal, but not
personal. It's not. It's not.
You might want to think about personal, but it's certainly not prejudicial.
I don't. I mean, it's not employment. This was many years ago, you know. But I'm just conscious, just in case anybody asks, since I've mentioned my own personal experience. But I can.
I think, Leader, given the nature of the decision that Cabinet is considering, my own view is it's not necessary. It's a matter for you ultimately, as a rule.
Okay, thank you for that. Colleagues, anybody else want to come in? No? Okay, so the recommendations are before us, and I'm not going to read those through again. I think we're absolutely 100% behind this. Are we all in favour? Great, thanks very much. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Joe. Okay. Right, let's go on to the next report, and that's the Social Justice Strategy Update, and that's Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So as you all are aware, as the Cabinet, we approved the strategy last May. It was in our manifesto and something that we were committed to doing, and it followed extensive consultation, not just with communities, but obviously internally with officers and councillors. So just over 12 months on since we agreed this strategy, I thought it was time for us to step back a bit and for me to proactively bring forward to you an updated action plan, and to show to you where we're actually seeking some really positive or seeing some really positive changes. So the strategy that you've got in front of you yourself, that hasn't changed. Our priorities remain very much the same, and those priorities were identified, as you know, through the wellbeing assessment, through that extensive consultation, and they're very much aligned to the Future Generations and Wellbeing Act and to our corporate plan. So in terms of the strategy, I'm very proud that we have it. I think it was quite a bold move for us to try and bring all this together and to try and embed social justice in everything that we do as a council in all your different departments. And we've always said, and I know I always say this, it's an evolving piece, but it really is. And I think that's the reason for me bringing it forward today. It's about taking feedback and getting some reflection on what we've achieved. In terms of the delivery against the strategy and the action plan that we put forward, the Community Partnership Development Team that Joe is part of, and which Kath leads with Sharon, that remains the enabling function for the strategy itself. It supports our communities and helps them to realise their full potential. But more widely, as you'll see from the action plan itself, all our departments in this council are responsible, have some responsibility for delivering against social justice. And it's also very much about working with partner organisations and with communities to deliver. So not seeing this as an inward-facing document. When I brought this forward last May, I talked about a social justice advisory group to introduce, and that's certainly taken shape, and it's a really important part of the process in helping us develop and monitor the progress against the strategy and the action plan. The inclusion group as well, that's been repurposed, and that's another really important arm in helping to bring forward ideas, and I'll mention a few of those as we go through some of the areas that we'll focus on. We've also got a social justice officer group, so that works cross-departmental, and it comes together to make sure that we are actually enacting change in this area. And I think that's a really positive move because it helps break down silo working and improves our sort of cross-council approach to social justice. So in terms of the document that you have in front of you today and the recommendations for you to adopt the updated action plan, I just want to draw your attention to page 36 and 37. So this is our performance indicators, and that's where we've set ourselves areas where we want to see improvements, and I'm pleased to say in almost all of the areas where we have baseline data, we have seen an improvement in that figure, or those figures rather. In terms of some of the actions, I've circulated to you as Cabinet an updated version so you can clearly see the new additions to the action plan, and there are many, so I think that again shows real progress. I could go through all of those and tell you about all the positive outcomes and where there are indeed challenges, but I think we'll be here for quite a few hours if we were to do that. And I know Councillor Petrini helpfully gave me the platform to outline some of those positive things that we're doing in council last week, so I'll try not to touch on all of those as well. I won't be repetitive in terms of what I go through. But just some of the things to pick up on that I think we should be proud of. We've got the early help panel, which is a really good opportunity for us. We've got the free school meals issue, which we've added in. I know this is a real challenge, and Richard will probably pick up on this. We've got the community focused school manager. So we've got Ryan in post now, who's working really hard to work on our social capital and to help communities there. In terms of overcoming inequalities to work, we've got Inspired to Achieve, Inspired to Work, Communities for Work Plus. And we've got lots of really positive work happening under tackling isolation and loneliness. So again, that are identified in the plan. So for me, this document isn't just about actions, it's about the principles as well. And I think the example and the way that we've approached different pieces of work, so for example, the budget and the work that Matt's done around cumulative impact shows how it's not just about the actions, it's about embedding those principles about all that we do. And I want to give you that assurance that we're reaching out to others to try and ensure that we're working with partners to understand how we can work more collaboratively. So I think I'm pleased with the progress. I think there's more that we can do. I think it's only 12 months on, so I think there's a lot to be pleased about. But I think we should all be proud as an administration that we're making a difference in this area, and it's certainly been embedded right across council departments.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Can I thank you first off for all of the work you've been doing over the last couple of years, shaping this big task. I challenge you with a big chance to start finding a way forward in some of these big issues, wicked issues which have been, are present in all authorities, but are obviously here as well, and we need to try and close the gap. So it was a difficult work and a piece of work, and that's the strategy was it was always going to be a fluid process which needed to be looked at and reviewed, and will always continually be so. But we can actually see tangible results of the strategy and the work that's being done now. We'll never be complete in this agenda. We'll always be constantly striving to add additional benefit to those who are most vulnerable or deprived in any way. As you've said, this is a responsibility for all cabinet members, for all members of the council. It should be a priority for all members in whatever leadership role they play within their communities as well. Always mindful of social justice and trying to put it right at the forefront of everything they do. And I believe most members in this council do that. I welcome the update, and I'll open it up then to colleagues. Bob.
Yeah, just to agree with you that having a cabinet member whose brief is social justice is vitally important, because the work she does stretches across all the areas of cabinet, and whilst we may not sometimes enjoy having her biting at our heels, having her do so, make sure that we also always make sure that the issues for social justice are in the front of what we're doing. And so in my own area, with the LDP, obviously we are looking to provide more social housing through the new LDP, because we recognise the need for that as we move forward. And it's an urgent need, but we also are working to ensure that we provide other forms of housing other than social housing. So through the Monmouthshire Letting Service, we're about to engage with a homeless project officer, for instance. We will be ensuring that we are keeping homelessness as low as we possibly can in Monmouthshire. Everybody deserves a decent home, and what we're about is trying to ensure that they get that.
Yeah. No, thanks, Bob. Phil?
Yeah, thank you. Just picking up on that point about housing, it struck me the section in here where we're dealing with care leavers, and we did about 12 months or so ago decide that we wouldn't we wouldn't make care leavers pay council tax for a period. I know we were circulating to everybody who it applied to that they had that opportunity. I don't know whether we have had any applications, and if so, have they all been granted?
Yeah, we've had a number of applications, all of which have been, of course, granted, so that's really positive. We know that there are still going to be care leavers that are eligible for this scheme, in the scheme that we introduced. So we'll do what we can to reach out to them and hope that they can complete and return the application so that they can also benefit from that.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I came from I've been in the finance forum with the Wales Government ministers this morning, and ministers were encouraging some authorities haven't been taking up and offering this out as they should have been. So I'm pleased to know that we have been, and we have delivered on it.
Yeah.
Paul?
Thanks, Peter. Sarah, I'm referring to the action plan, 2.5, that refers to provide access to the labour market for people with disabilities and care leavers. I see that that's still in red. Can you tell me something about that?
Yeah, there's a number of initiatives in that action in terms of the progress that's been made. So I think we could possibly move that to an amber. But in terms of some of the statistics around that, in terms of care leavers that are not in education or employment or training 2 years after leaving care, we have seen an improving figure in that. So previously the figure was 50%, that's now 73% in the last 2 years. So that's an increase. It's still too too low, and we want to increase that figure of number of people that are actually in employment and training. Also in terms of the disability side and improving opportunities on that front, and I'll be excited to put forward a statement to council in a couple of weeks' time, but we as a council are now a disability confident employer. We've signed the pledge to be disability confident, and that comes out of the work that we've done as part of the inclusion group that was repurposed. So again, it's about taking steps to improve access to employment for disabled people. So I think, yeah, there's red in there, but I think possibly we can move that to another.
Good to you. Colleagues, anybody else? Richard?
I wanted to reference Sarah's point about the free school meals outcomes, and while we consistently have some of the best outcomes for free school meals pupils in Wales in the early years, we have been clear that the gap at Key Stage 4 is too wide. Cabinet took the decision this year that we would put some additional money targeted to support free school meals pupils into our 4 secondary schools, and I've met regularly with the 4 secondary head teachers to talk about the impact that that's having, and the additional support sessions they've put in, additional one-to-one tutoring for free school meals pupils. In Chepstow, I think breakfasts have been offered to free school meals pupils on the mornings of their examinations. There's an awful lot of work that's been done to support those year 11 pupils on the run up to these exams. Although it's too early to say definitively, we are seeing a more positive trajectory from schools for their free school meals outcomes for this summer. Although we do recognise that one of the reasons for the why the gap is so wide between free school meals and non-free school meals outcomes is because we have some of the best non-free school meals outcomes in Wales. Of course, we don't want that gap to narrow because of any falls. We want every pupil to do better, but we want to narrow that gap by raising the performance of our most vulnerable pupils. In the debate we had 2 weeks ago, I referenced some meetings I had with head teachers in Chepstow and Caldecott, where we talked through some of the support that pupils are getting. I had a meeting with the head teacher in King Henry VIII Comprehensive School a few days ago, and again we talked about the targeted support that's being made available for vulnerable pupils there. I feel I should pay tribute to Peter and Sarah for really pushing the social justice agenda. And we should remember that we are still the only local authority in the country with a dedicated cabinet member to addressing some of these social justice challenges. And I think really embedding social justice in the organisation is so important, and it's having such a big impact. I mean, Sarah referenced the debate we had 2 weeks ago. Well, just the fact that the opposition are now talking about our agenda is fantastic. The whole council debating how we can support our most vulnerable pupils can only be a good thing.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. you're the only cabinet member in Wales. Do we know how or other authorities are advancing with social justice strategies?
Not aware of any as a council. We've certainly not been approached because I'd be very keen to talk to other local
Yeah.
authorities and to share best practice.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm happy to say, I want to work. I don't want this to be a politicised issue. Of course, it's going to be, and there's often occasions where it is brought to that attention. But if I can work with other authorities to develop and progress this, because obviously that will help us, all of us, long term. We can work collaboratively.
I think that's a point which I've made several times at WLGA. We're a small local government family across Wales, and actually good practice isn't shared good and well enough or often enough in all areas, and it's something that WLGA has really got to get to grips with, because there will be pockets of great practice across Wales which none of us know about, and we'll have things to share and we'll have things to learn as well. So, Penny?
Oh yeah, well, it's all been said now, Chair, but I was just going to say that I think this report demonstrates that social justice has been embedded in all our portfolios, and it shows Sarah's commitment to it. Just an example from social services point of view is the young care leavers have an access to leisure facilities, which fits in with our health and wellbeing strategy. So it's all good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Dimitri furnished me with some questions as well, and I'll obviously let Sarah have those. But Dimitri, over to you.
Where does the child poverty drafts fit into the strategy?
You're referring to the tackling poverty strategy and
No,
action
child
plan?
poverty.
Which child poverty draft? You're referring to a child poverty draft. I'm not sure which one you mean.
I was sent one in January. You're not aware we have one?
We've got a tackling poverty strategy and action plan which encompasses child poverty and
I'll send
family.
it to you now. So does it fit into this agenda?
Yes, because on page 4, I think it outlines that a tackling poverty action plan and strategy is something that we commit to. And then if you look in the action plan itself on page 26, it talks about working with partners to develop a plan and also to look at aligned resources to tackle the problems that we face. The FEDIP group, which is a PSB group, meets regularly to try and discuss these issues and to bring together this action plan that we're proposing. And you're very welcome to come to the next meeting. I don't think you've been to one before. That's next week. Say very open invite to that. But that group's leading on that issue, because I don't think as a council we should be focusing or leading it. I think it needs to be a PSB, a partner-led approach to tackling the challenge of addressing poverty.
Okay, so we don't measure child poverty. To what extent do you think Welsh or UK government policies will have an impact on this strategy?
Perhaps I didn't articulate myself properly in the last council debate, because I thought I referred to this. I think we all know that we don't have all the levers we need to make a difference. We're reliant on national policies to some extent. At the same time, I do believe it's within our gift, of course, to make a difference. That's the point of having a strategy, which is a bold move in terms of trying to bring all this together. But equally, we all know that we need a supportive government that's going to help drive forward the right, drive forward the sort of opportunities to address these challenges that we face. I think, what I'm really keen to do, and I mentioned it before, is to try and take the politics out of this. I know that we've got our differences of opinions, we've got different political ideologies, but as Francis said in the last council meeting, let's try and work together on these challenges. Let's try and take the politics out of it. Use your expertise, Francis' expertise and others, as part of the Social Justice Advisory Group to try and make a difference. Whilst we don't have all the levers and we can try and push government to make changes to support us, let's see what we can do collaboratively across party lines.
I'm willing to work collaboratively when action actually happens. Are
you happy to take up the invite to be part of that? Yeah, but you're going to turn up and actually go to do it. Did you say you haven't been to a meeting or something?
He's been to the social justice view, yeah.
Okay.
So
we're going to work inclusively together then to make for better outcomes. Great, good, that's good.
On universal credit, you only mentioned the ICT issue in the social justice strategy. That's the only action point. Are you aware that 1,500 people are being migrated across Monmouthshire and about to lose a week's worth of payments next year because the universal credit system can't deal with the payments? Do you have an action plan how to deal with that?
Again, the FEDIP group, because we bring together partners that are all dealing with the issues around universal credit, are discussing that and looking at the actions they can do to mitigate against that. So, for example, I had a meeting last week I attended. I'm not sure if any of the other members, whether you, Dimitri, took up the invite to go to one of the employability workshops. had the opportunity to talk to people that are addressing some of these issues around universal credit, and we're all looking to work together to try and deal with the challenges that that's going to face.
How are we progressing on free school meals results at GCSE level, action point?
Yeah, I think Councillor Johns addressed that. I think the fact that we put that in the action
Can you
plan.
confirm with the worst in Wales?
What I can say is that we put that in the action plan because we identify that we need to do more, and it's a disappointing statistic that we've seen in the past. But what we are saying is that there's a lot of effort, a lot of progress going on in this area, and I know working with Councillor John that we're likely to see hopefully an improving picture over the next.
So the worst in Wales.
period.
Can you explain to me why local housing action point is green?
Yeah, for exactly the reasons outlined in the progress column of the plan.
Homelessness is up, housing waiting list is up, child families are up. That's why I'm asking why it's green, because I was trying to explain why I'm asking.
I'm talking about the actions that we're taking to try and mitigate against that. Now, you're not necessarily going to see immediate results, but what you are seeing is, for example, the number of properties being managed by Monmouthshire Letting Services increasing by 12% over the last 12 months. All that we're doing, it's the actions that we're putting in there which are green. In terms of some of those outcomes and what those statistics are going to look like, yes, we're going to have to monitor them closely. And what I suggest, if that's an area of real interest to you, put it forward as an idea for our work plan for the social justice group. You're perfectly entitled to do that and ask for it. I said put forward ideas for the social justice group, because that's the area where we can really start to address some of these things at a closer level. If you want to do that, there's the opportunity to do so.
It makes me concerned about the RAG ratings generally. Who decides them?
Okay, so the RAG rating is an assessment by officers. That's informed by knowledge of progress against milestones and the available data. It's also using the progress updates that we get at the social justice group, so using feedback from that group itself. We use that RAG rating because it's quite easy to understand. I think, at the moment the focus is red, means that something's in inception, it's yet to make an impact. If it's amber, it's in development, or it's under consideration in terms of next steps. Or green, it's delivering positive impacts or in full order. So I think going forward, we might want to look at how we use the 6-point scale that we use for the corporate assessment or the Corporate Council's performance frameworks. That's another area we could use to look for assessment. But no, as it stands, that's the way in which we assess.
Okay, quite subjective.
Yeah, thank you.
How are we? I got one last question.
Well, not on my list.
I have protected characteristics.
Oh, sorry, come on.
How are we performing on the delivery? I know I've sent. How are we performing on the delivery outcomes for protected characteristics?
Oh, I see.
On race and ALM, both of which have no measures in them.
Okay, so I think maybe you're confusing things. This is a social justice strategy which works alongside.
So they're not part of social justice.
I'm sorry, let me finish. So there's a number of strategies that work alongside the social justice strategy, one of which, as you should fully be aware, is the strategic equality plan. The strategic equality plan has had 7 progress reports. It's in a current iteration which we'll finalise next year, which there'll be a 3rd strategic equality plan. We know we're performing well. We've had feedback from the HRC and Welsh Government on these pieces of work. In terms of some of those areas you mentioned then on race, we have the inclusion group that's been repurposed. It's doing a specific piece of work at the moment on hate crime and bullying in schools. And and that's why we're focusing on it, Dimitri. That's why we decided to look at it. And it's showing that we're very much an action-led council that's very much working to these principles of social justice. And yes, we're not going to see immediate results, but what we're doing is we're doing the right thing for our communities and for our residents. And if you fail to see that, then I think that's something that's an issue.
Thanks, Sarah. And I think that demonstrated absolutely, as well as what was said in the council meeting last week, that this council is absolutely
committed.
That's what I want. Committed to the social justice agenda. And it's disappointing that there is this. It has become very politicalised lately. There's for no real need. There's actually a desire, because you desire the same things we desire for the council and the people who live here.
Why not to hold you to account?
And we really, yes, but there's a way to hold to account, and actually the way you've done that in the recent council meeting, and the tone today as well, isn't helpful. But hopefully we can work on together. I think the strategy is a really good foundation. It has been a great foundation, and I thank everybody for the work that they're doing right across the organisation.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we'll continue and strengthen that as we move forward. Okay, I'm going to take us back to the recommendation. And that is that in 2.1 that the Cabinet approves the updated social justice strategy action plan in Appendix A and offers feedback on the associated activities today. Are we all in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, move on to item 3C, that's the Welsh Church funding group, and this is the recommendations of the group which met on the 11th of April and the 20th of June. You'll see the schedule of applications considered. The majority of those are for recommendation. I believe there are 2 which have been deferred. That's the Patient's Voice and the Caldecott Town team. So I'm sure they'll be flowing back through to that committee whenever the required additional information is presented. So can we take those, please, that we resolve that the following grants be awarded as per schedule of applications? All in favour of that? Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, great. Okay, move on to the 3D. That's the Monmouthshire Replacement Local Development Plan, Issues, Vision and Objectives paper. Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. This is really just catching up on the discussion that we had in the last Cabinet. And you will remember that the last Cabinet meeting was called after the council meeting which brought forward the climate emergency policies. So what we did at the last meeting was verbally to propose some changes to our policy, to the paper we've got in front of us today. And what you now see in there are those changes put into black and white. So it's really nothing new that is in there that I think was not discussed at the last meeting, but it is for clarity of those people who will be looking in to see what the council has been doing in terms of the climate emergency and how it is now affecting the emergence of our local development plan. Just one little aside from that, on page 118, where we are talking about retail centres, we do mention the 4 main towns and the need to have action on those 4 main towns. What it doesn't mention is the town of Usk as well. It might not be regarded as a major town, but it is nevertheless one of the towns where we do need to work in terms of economic development going forward. So if I could just have the town of Usk mentioned in that as well as the 4 major towns, and that would put it complete. So that's it really, Leader. It is just what we were talking about and what we had decided in the last Cabinet meeting.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Anybody need to add anything? No. Mark, is anything you need to add?
No, Leader, if that's Cabinet's decision to add reference to us, then we do that and publish that as the final version.
Okay, so 2.1 then, the recommendation is to endorse the growth of spatial options. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one, sorry, that's not the one I want to be looking at. It's to endorse the amendments to the Issues, Visions and Objectives paper, which consolidates the changes agreed at the 5th of June 2019 Cabinet meeting, noting that the objectives and vision will continue to be refined as the LDP preferred strategy is drafted and consulted on, and we add the element of naming Usk. Yeah. Okay, all in favour of that?
I had a question I sent to you.
Oh, is it for this one or for the next one?
I thought it was for this one. Is this where we amended it to include climate change 1.5?
Yeah, sorry, yes, you're right, sorry, Dimitri, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think really the shape of the LDP will be determined by members, by each and every member of this authority through a democratic process. And as we move forward, it is therefore up to each and every one of us that we ensure that in the opportunities that we have to enter into debate in the various workshops that we have, that we, each of us, take forward the issues of striving to embed policies which take into account the emergency, the climate emergency. Having said that, I would also draw your attention to the action plan which is being brought forward in September, I think, by Councillor Pratt, our climate emergency, under our climate emergency policy. And that will in itself inform the LDP process going forward. And the LDP process will be subject to monitoring. So there will be plenty of monitoring moving forward. But I would underline that it is the responsibility of every member of this authority, while they are entering into discussions and debates through the various workshops that are coming forward, that they keep the issue of climate emergency to the fore of the discussions. And I did mention when we had the last members workshop just last week, which was on a related topic, that we do need all members, whether they're in whatever political party, the executive or not, we do need them to be part of this workshop, because this policy, as it comes and it emerges, is a policy of every single one of us in this council. And we do need to be part of that. So I do hope, and you as well, Councillor Petrunia, very welcome to come to these workshops where you can actually add to the debate at the point at which we are forming the policies.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I think, did we vote on the recommendation? Do it again. All in favour of the recommendation with that amendment? Okay, thanks very much for that. Okay, I'm going to leave the meeting now. I think Sarah as well. Can you close the meeting as well, Bob? Because there won't be another item after the next.
Yeah, we'll go around.
Okay.
Right, for this we have Mark Hand with us, and Rachel Lewis as well, who bear the brunt of the work that we're doing on our local development plan going forward. And we now reach a point where we are considering growth and spatial options. Now, within the statutory process, it is not actually necessary to go out to consultation at the stage we are at the moment, but we feel that it is the right thing to do. So the paper that we have in front of us brings forward from a piece of work that we joined with Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen to produce, and this brings forward options for us moving forward, which we will put out to consultation now. It will go out to a number of member workshops. It will also be going around our area committees and our clusters, and is going out to everyone who is now on our growing LDP database. And indeed, there will also be an opportunity for a drop-in session later this month for anyone who is interested to come forward and to talk with officers about the options for growth. You will see in this paper there are 8 different growth options that are being suggested. So what level of growth do we want, and what is going to drive that growth? And what spatial options? Where are we going to put the houses and the industrial land which we're going to bring forward in the future? So that's the purpose of bringing this forward now. It is for Cabinet to agree that we go out to non-statutory consultation on these options for a period of 4 weeks, after which all the comments will be evaluated. But just before we do that, I think we've got an animation, if we can bring it forward, which will actually help inform the different meetings as we go forward. So, Mark, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Leader. Technology permitting, we'll show you this. Some of the feedback we've had already is that we're dealing with some pretty complex background evidence papers. So on this particular one, we've done an executive summary, an easy read guide, which Councillor Watkins gave some feedback on earlier, thank you, and this animation just to try and make some of the complexity be a bit more digestible while having the evidence behind the scenes. So it's just a 3-minute animation about the LDP that we can add to as stages develop. One bit of feedback we've already had is the music in the background's too loud, so we're mindful of that, and that'll be amended before it goes.
Well, I think that's very good indeed. It really sets it out in a nutshell.
Shows what it is.
Mark, anything else you want to say at this point?
Well, if there's any other feedback on that we can incorporate, we've done a couple of things. So the music I mentioned, the text all being in caps, we're going to get changed. We didn't particularly like that. But it's just some smaller tweaks.
The message is good.
Yeah, a Welsh language version is going to be produced as soon as we've confirmed the final detail of the English language version.
Okay.
Is that going to go on our website?
Yes.
You said you've had some comments already, particularly about the music. Was that from people being able to look at it?
Yeah,
on the website, or was it somewhere else that they saw it?
It was with the Usk area cluster yesterday, Councillor Murphy. So to sequence all of the consultation with the cluster meetings, we actually had to go to one yesterday, present to them, but on the basis, whether the consultation happens depends on today's decision. But yeah, some feedback from them was really positive. And based on that, there were a couple of other changes we were minded to make to the actual reports. And we don't need to touch on those.
Yeah, would you like to do that now?
They're very minor changes, but questions arose around, what sits alongside the LDP. So we're suggesting to add something into the introduction and the executive summary, just to confirm there's going to be a local transport plan that sits alongside it. will contain an infrastructure plan and also alongside an economic strategy, or decide on the correct terminology for that document. And also some of the detail around population change and number of dwellings. There wasn't a baseline figure for people to understand what that means. So add in the fact that 2017 population of the county is 93,590, and the number of dwellings, which we're finalising, just so people know, where are we starting from.
Okay. Any other comments from members? Right. So there's only one recommendation to endorse the growth and special options paper. I would suggest also that we consider the amendments and changes that Mark has just outlined. So are we all in favour? Yes. That's it.
Thank you.
And that's the final item on our agenda. So we'll close the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.